My husband confessed he was in love with my sister. He thought it would break me, but I already knew. Not because I saw them together, because I was tracking the money for 9 months. So when he finally told me the truth, it didn't hurt. It confirmed everything I needed. The rain started before he spoke. Not heavy, just steady enough to blur the glass walls of our living room and turn the city into something softer, less defined. Victor stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand still on his phone. He didn't put it down. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the tension in his shoulders, not the way he avoided looking directly at me. The phone. He used to leave it everywhere. Tonight, it stayed with him like it mattered. "I need to tell you something," he said. There are sentences that arrive with weight. You don't know what they carry yet, but your body prepares anyway. I muted the television. The room went quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping against the glass. He didn't sit next to me. He chose the chair across from me instead. That distance said more than anything else could have. "I'm in love with Mara." He said it evenly, like he'd practiced it enough times that the words had lost their edge. "And it's not new," he added. "It's been about 2 years." 2 years. The number hung there between us, clean and simple. Too simple. I looked at him for a long moment, not at his eyes, at the space around them, the small tightening at the corners, the way his jaw set half a second after he finished speaking. That wasn't relief. That was control. "Okay," I said. He blinked. Just once. It was subtle, but it was there. He had expected something else. Anger, shock, a reaction he could respond to. "What does that mean?" he asked carefully. "It means I heard you." The rain filled the silence again. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees like he was about to explain something complicated to a client. That was his posture when he wanted to feel in control. "I didn't plan for this," he said. "It just happened, and I didn't know how to stop it." I nodded once, slow. "Of course you didn't." Another pause, longer this time. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he continued. "I thought it was better if I told you myself." That part was interesting. Better for who? I stood up, not abruptly, just enough to shift the dynamic. He tracked the movement immediately. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it, not for the reason he thought, because now I had confirmation. He watched me, searching for something in my face, anything he could use to anchor the situation. "Are you okay?" he asked. That question almost made me smile. "I will be." It wasn't reassurance. It was a statement of fact. His grip tightened slightly around the phone. There it was again. I walked past him toward the hallway, feeling his eyes follow me. Every step measured, every movement intentional. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Out for a minute? Now?" "Yes." He stood halfway, uncertain whether to stop me. He didn't. Good. I grabbed my coat, the fabric cool against my fingers, and stepped outside. The rain hit immediately, sharper than it had looked from inside. The air smelled clean, almost cold enough to wake something up. I didn't rush. There was no need to. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement in long, broken lines. A car passed at the end of the block, tires hissing softly. I walked to the edge of the driveway and stopped. Then I took out my phone. For a second, I just looked at it. Not because I didn't know what to do, because this was the point where everything shifted from assumption to structure. I dialed. It rang once. "Yeah?" the voice on the other end said. "It's me," I replied. A brief pause. Not confusion, recognition. "Well?" I looked back at the house. Through the glass, I could still see him moving, pacing slightly now. "He confirmed," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "You sure?" "Yes." The rain picked up, tapping harder against my coat. "And the timeline?" the voice asked. "Off," I said. "Not by much, but enough." A quiet exhale on the other end. "Then we're there." I closed my eyes for half a second, not to think, to mark it. "We crossed the threshold," I said. "No emotion in it, just precision." "All right," the voice replied. "Then we move." I ended the call. For a moment, I stood there in the rain, letting it soak through the fabric at my shoulders. The cold settled in slowly, steady and grounding. Inside the house, Victor stopped pacing. He was looking toward the door now, waiting. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward the entrance. Every step felt clear, defined. Not because I knew exactly what would happen next, but because I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the beginning of something breaking. It was the point where everything finally made sense. I opened the door and stepped back inside. The first time I noticed something was off, I didn't think of betrayal. I thought of inconsistency. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that used to feel routine. Coffee, quiet, sunlight, stretching across the kitchen floor. Victor said he was heading to the gym. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what came after. 47 minutes. I didn't count it then. I only noticed later, when I started looking backward instead of forward. At exactly 9:12, the camera feed in the hallway glitched. Not off, not disconnected, just missing. A small gap, less than a minute. At the time, I dismissed it. Smart home systems fail. Connections drop. Software updates happen. Except it didn't happen randomly. It happened again the next week. And the week after that. Same time, same duration. Patterns don't form by accident. They repeat because someone maintains them. I didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, I watched. Victor adjusted the thermostat one evening while we were making dinner. He did it through the control panel, not the app. Manual override. That told me something. Access level. Most people don't think about who has administrative control in their own home. They assume shared means equal. It doesn't. A few days later, I checked the system logs, not directly, casually, the way you check something you don't want to announce you're checking. There it was, admin access, Victor Hale, full permissions, including camera override. I closed the panel and went back to the kitchen. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't react. That was the second thing I noticed. No reaction. People hiding something tend to overcorrect. They ask questions they shouldn't. They pay attention in the wrong moments. Victor didn't. He moved through the house the same way he always had. Calm, measured, efficient. That made it worse. Because it meant whatever he was doing, he believed it was controlled. Mara changed too. Not dramatically. That would have been easier to catch. She became intermittent. Texts that used to come instantly started taking hours. Calls went to voicemail more often than not. Plans shifted at the last minute with explanations that felt complete, but somehow empty. Busy week. Traveling. Just needed some time. All reasonable, all forgettable. Individually, none of it meant anything. Together, it formed something else. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, holding my phone, rereading a message from her that said nothing and somehow said everything at the same time. "I'll call you later." She didn't. I didn't follow up. Not because I didn't care. Because I was starting to understand that chasing answers too early changes the outcome. And I wasn't ready to change anything yet. One night, about 6 months before Victor's confession, I woke up around 2 a.m. No reason. Just that quiet shift where your body decides it's no longer asleep. The house was still, dark. Victor wasn't in bed. I lay there for a moment listening. Then I heard it. Not voices, not movement. Silence, in the wrong place. The kind of silence that happens when a door is closed that usually isn't. I got up, slowly. The hallway light was off, but there was a faint glow coming from the downstairs office. I walked halfway down the stairs and stopped. The door was almost closed, not fully, just enough. And there was light inside. I didn't go in. Instead, I stood there, watching the thin line of light at the edge of the door, waiting. After a minute, it disappeared. The light switched off. A few seconds later, the door opened. Victor stepped out, already holding his phone. He looked up, saw me. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Couldn't sleep? He asked. His voice was steady, too steady. Just woke up, I said. He nodded, like that made sense, and walked past me toward the stairs. No explanation, no curiosity, just movement. I turned and watched him go. That was the moment something inside me shifted, not emotionally, structurally, because I realized I wasn't looking at a mistake. I was looking at a system. The next morning, I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I made coffee. I answered emails. I moved through the day exactly as I always did. And later, when I was alone, I opened my laptop and started pulling data. Not everything. Just enough to see if what I thought I was seeing was actually there. At first, it didn't look like much. Small inconsistencies, timing gaps, minor irregularities in account activity. Nothing you could point to and say, this is it. But enough to say something had begun. And once something begins, it doesn't stop on its own. It grows. All it needs is time. I sat back in my chair and looked at the screen. Then I said it out loud, quietly, just to hear how it sounded. This isn't secrecy. The words felt precise, accurate. I watched the data refresh, numbers adjusting, logs updating in real time, and I finished the thought. This is structure. I didn't start with the largest account. That would have been obvious. And obvious is where people expect you to look. Instead, I started small, a secondary brokerage account we rarely discussed. Low activity, long-term holdings. The kind of place money sits quietly and no one checks too often because nothing is supposed to happen there. That's exactly why it matters. I logged in late at night, the house already still. The glow of the screen reflected faintly against the window, turning the room into a mirror I avoided looking at. At first, everything appeared normal. Balances aligned, positions unchanged, no alerts. Then I filtered by transaction history instead of summary. And there it was. Not one large withdrawal, a series of small ones. Spread out, carefully timed, the kind of movement designed not to trigger attention. I leaned closer to the screen. Dates, amounts, intervals. It wasn't random, it followed a rhythm. Every few weeks, slight variations, never enough to stand out individually. But together, I opened a second window and started mapping them out. One column for dates, one for amounts, one for destination. That was when the pattern began to take shape. The money didn't disappear. It moved. From the brokerage account into a business entity. I paused. That part mattered. Not a personal account, not a direct transfer. An entity. I pulled up the name. A Delaware registration. Clean, minimal, almost invisible. No obvious connection to us. But the timing said otherwise. I kept going. From that entity, the funds split again. Part routed through a payment processor. Part moved into a digital asset platform. Layering. Not aggressive. Not rushed. Just enough to blur the path without breaking it. Whoever built this understood how visibility works. You don't erase the trail. You make it harder to follow. I sat back, letting the information settle. Then I did what I always do. I checked the authorization layer. Who signed these transactions? The answer came up almost immediately. My name. Not typed. Authenticated. I didn't move for a moment, just stared at it. Because that changed everything. This wasn't theft. It was positioning. I went deeper, pulled the authorization logs, session data, access points. At first glance, it held proper credentials, correct timing, no obvious breach, but something felt off, not wrong, just too clean. I cross-referenced the timestamps with my own activity, work logs, calendar entries, email records. There were overlaps, moments where the system said I approved a transfer while I was on a call, or in a meeting, or asleep. Not impossible, but unlikely, repeatedly unlikely. I exhaled slowly. They didn't steal my identity, I said under my breath. The words formed clearly, without hesitation. They borrowed just enough of it. I minimized the screen and opened a new trace. This time, I followed the entity itself. Registration data, formation records, linked contacts. Nothing obvious surfaced at first, which meant I needed to look sideways instead of forward. I checked indirect associations, service providers, filing agents, payment gateways. That's where it shifted. A familiar name, not direct, but adjacent. A consulting firm that had worked with Victor's company 6 months earlier. Same filing agent, same structure, different name. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt quieter now, not empty, just focused. I wasn't looking at fragments anymore. I was looking at a system, and systems don't build themselves. I pulled up the total transfer amount, added everything together. $380,000. Not all at once, not in a way anyone would notice immediately, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to escalate, enough to cross lines that don't stay private. I closed my eyes briefly, not from shock, from alignment, because now the pieces fit. Victor's behavior, Mara's distance, the camera gaps, the late-night office light, none of it was separate. It was coordinated. I opened the last layer, the final destination, the digital asset platform. Not hidden, just distant enough from the source to create separation. And there, tied to the account structure, was another entity, different name, different jurisdiction, but the same pattern, and attached to it, a secondary authorization profile. Not fully mine, but close enough to be. I felt something shift in my chest then, not panic, not fear, something sharper, recognition. "They're not hiding money," I said quietly. The words landed heavier this time. I looked at the screen, at the clean lines of data, the quiet precision of the structure they had built. They're building a case against me. The realization didn't come all at once. It settled, layer by layer, just like the transactions. If this continued unchecked, if the pattern completed, it wouldn't look like someone stole from us. It would look like I moved the money myself. Authorized, structured, deliberate. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Too soon. Acting now would collapse the pattern. And without the pattern, there's no case. I leaned back, letting the silence fill the room again. The rain had stopped. The city outside was still. Everything looked normal. That was the problem, because nothing about this was normal, and the only way to prove it was to let it continue. I reopened the transaction log, watched the numbers, the timing, the flow. Then I whispered, almost to myself, "Keep going." I didn't confront them. That's the part most people don't understand. They think the moment you see it, you act, you stop it, you expose it, you end it. But stopping something too early erases what it could become. And what I needed wasn't suspicion. It was proof. 9 months before Victor sat across from me and told me he loved my sister, I booked a flight to Vancouver under a different name. Not to hide, to separate. Seattle was too close, too connected, too familiar. I needed distance to see clearly. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. Mid-morning, light crowd, no one paying attention to anyone else. Perfect. He was already there. Gray jacket, no tie. Laptop closed in front of him, hands resting calmly on either side like he wasn't waiting for anything at all. But he was. I sat down across from him. "You're early," he said. "I like knowing where I am," I replied. He gave a small nod, like that made sense. "What do you have?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took out my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward him. Transaction logs. Partial, not everything. Just enough. He studied it for a few seconds, eyes moving quickly, not surprised. Just calculating. "Layered," he said finally. "Yes." "Not sloppy." "No." He leaned back slightly. "And you're in it," he added. "On paper." He looked at me then, directly. "That's not an accident." "I know." A pause settled between us, not uncomfortable, just precise. "You want to stop it?" he asked. That was the question most people would answer immediately. I didn't, because the answer wasn't simple. "If I stop it now," I said, "it looks like an anomaly." He didn't interrupt. "If I let it run," I continued, "it becomes a pattern." "And patterns," he said quietly, "hold up in court." I nodded. "That's the idea." He tapped his fingers once against the table, thinking. "There's risk," he said. "Yes." How much are you willing to absorb? That was the real question, not whether I could stop it, but whether I could carry it long enough to prove it. I looked out the window for a moment, rain moving lightly across the glass, soft and steady. Enough, I said. He watched me carefully, measuring the answer, then he nodded once. All right. No hesitation. No negotiation, just alignment. We'll need structure, he said. Legal first. I've already identified someone, I replied. Good. Financial next, I added. Forensic accounting, he said. Yes. He leaned forward slightly now, more engaged. And data control, he continued. If they're building a trail, we need to see every step of it. I can mirror most of it, I said. Most? Not all. That mattered. Nothing is ever complete, and pretending it is how you lose. He didn't push it. Then we work with what you have, he said. I slid the phone back toward me and locked it. They think I don't see it, I said. They usually do, he replied. That's not enough, I said. No, he agreed. It's not. Another pause. Then he asked, do they know each other's roles? That question stayed with me. I don't think so, I said slowly. Not fully. Good, he said. Why? Because that's where mistakes happen. I let that settle. Victor thought he was in control. Mara thought she understood the situation, but systems built on partial knowledge always crack. We don't interfere yet, I said. No, he agreed. We observe. And when it's enough, he met my eyes. We move. Simple, clean, final. I sat back, feeling the shape of it solidify. Not emotionally, structurally, because this wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about timing. One transfer doesn't matter, I said quietly. He nodded. But a pattern is evidence, he finished. Exactly. When I flew back to Seattle that night, nothing had changed. The house looked the same. Victor greeted me the same way. Mara texted me the next morning like she always had. Everything felt intact. That was the illusion. Because underneath it, something had already begun. I didn't watch them differently. I watched the system, the flow, the timing, the decisions they didn't realize they were making. And slowly, piece by piece, I built a second structure alongside theirs. Not to stop it, to record it. Not perfect. There were gaps, moments I couldn't mirror in real time, transactions that passed through faster than I could track. That bothered me. It should have, because that's where exposure lives. Once I missed a transfer entirely. By the time I caught it, it had already moved 2 layers deep. I sat there staring at the screen, the absence louder than any data I had. For a second, I considered shutting it down, stopping everything. But I didn't, because stopping it would protect them. Letting it continue would define them. So I adjusted, refined the system, tightened what I could control, accepted what I couldn't, and kept going. By the time Victor finally sat across from me and said he loved Mara, the outcome had already shifted. Not emotionally, but structurally. Because I wasn't hearing something new. I was confirming something already in motion. And confirmation is where everything changes. They didn't panic. That surprised me. People usually do once something shifts. They overreact, they rush, they make noise. Victor and Mara did the opposite. They slowed down. That's how I knew they felt pressure. Not fear, pressure. Mara came first. Wednesday evening, just after 6. I saw her through the glass before the doorbell rang, standing still, shoulders slightly drawn in, hands loosely folded like she had rehearsed where to put them. She chose that posture carefully, soft, non-threatening, familiar. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Hi," she said. Her voice was quiet, controlled, almost gentle. "Hi." A pause stretched between us. "I know this isn't a good time," she continued, "but I didn't want to wait." She glanced past me briefly, as if checking whether Victor was inside. He wasn't. "I heard," she said. Of course she did. "I'm sorry." There it was, delivered exactly the way it should be. Not too emotional, not too distant, balanced. I didn't come here to make things worse, she added. I needed you to hear it from me. I watched her for a moment. Not the words, the timing, the pacing. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to assess. I hear you, I said. Nothing more. Her expression shifted, just slightly, not disappointment, adjustment. I never meant for it to happen like this, she said. 3 years of coordination doesn't happen accidentally, but I let the sentence sit. You should go, I said. The softness disappeared for a fraction of a second. There. Then it came back. I care about you, she said. I know. Another pause. She nodded once, then turned and walked back down the path without looking back. I closed the door slowly. She hadn't pushed, which meant she didn't need to. Not yet. Victor tried something different, Saturday morning. Calm, bright, normal. He waited until I was making coffee, like routine would soften the conversation. I've been thinking, he said. I didn't turn around. About what? About how we handle this. Handle, not discuss, not process, handle. We don't have to turn this into a fight, he continued, for the kids, for everything. There it was, framing. I poured the coffee, set the mug down, then looked at him. What are you suggesting? Mediation, he said. Keep it contained. Private. Contained. That word mattered. And faster, he added. Less damage. To who? I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded, relieved too quickly. Mistake. Because relief means expectation, and expectation can be used. Later that afternoon, the email came. No subject line, no signature. Just a short message. If you continue down this path, certain details about your professional conduct may be shared with your firm. I read it twice. Not for the words, for the structure. No emotional language, no direct accusation, just implication. Careful. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it. Then I made one call. Not long, not complicated, just enough to set a process in motion. After that, I sat at my desk and opened the header data, IP routing, device fingerprint, origin path. It didn't take long. They had tried to mask it, basic obfuscation. Nothing advanced. The signal still came through, not directly to her, but close enough. Mara. I leaned back in my chair, letting the confirmation settle. Not surprising, but useful, because threats change the structure. They move things out of gray areas and into defined ones. I checked the transaction logs again. Another transfer had gone through that morning, smaller than the last, faster. I pulled the authorization record. Victor, timestamp matched. But this time, there was something else. A secondary approval layer. Subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. I zoomed in. Session overlap, his credentials intersecting with mine, not fully, just enough to create ambiguity. That was new, and it meant one thing. They were accelerating, which meant they were close to completing something. I opened my tracking system and ran a comparison. What I had mirrored, what had passed through. There it was, a gap, small but real. One transaction I hadn't captured in time. For a second, my hand hovered over the keyboard. That gap mattered, because gaps are where narratives get rewritten. I exhaled slowly, adjusted the parameters, pulled deeper logs, reconstructed the path from secondary sources. It took longer, but I closed it. Not perfectly. Close enough. I sat back, the tension settling into something sharper. They were getting bolder, Mara applying pressure, Victor pushing resolution, the system tightening. That meant they believed they were ahead. Good, because belief creates mistakes. I reached for my phone and sent a single message. We file. No explanation needed. A few seconds later, the reply came. Ready when you are. I looked at the screen for a moment, then I set the phone down. Across the house, everything looked the same. Quiet, normal, intact, but underneath it, the structure had shifted again, and this time, it wasn't just theirs anymore. The filing happened on a Monday. Not dramatic, Not loud, just a document submitted through the right channel at the right time. Irreconcilable differences. That was the language. Neutral, clean, designed to move things forward without inviting unnecessary resistance. Victor was served at his office. I didn't see it happen. I didn't need to. He called twice, then 3 more times. I let all of them go. By the time he came home that evening, the shift had already taken place. He stood in the kitchen, the same spot where he had confessed, but he didn't sit this time. He stayed standing. "You filed," he said. Not a question. "Yes." A pause. "You could have talked to me first." I looked at him. "We did talk." His jaw tightened. "That's not what I mean." "I know." The silence stretched. Different now, less controlled. "I was trying to handle this without making it worse," he said. "For who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he shifted. "They're going to look at everything now," he added. "Finances, accounts, all of it." "Yes. And you're okay with that?" "I am." That landed. Not because of the words, because of the certainty. He studied my face for something, anything he could read. There wasn't much to find. "All right," he said finally, but it wasn't agreement. It was recalculation. He left the room a moment later, phone already in his hand. I didn't follow. I didn't need to hear what he said. I already knew who he was calling. By Wednesday, the next step was in motion. We met in a conference room downtown. Glass walls, neutral furniture, the kind of space designed to keep emotion out of the conversation. My attorney sat to my left. Across from us, Victor and his, Kowalski, experienced, controlled, the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste movement. He opened first. Measured tone, structured argument. "Mr. Hale has managed the financial accounts for years with no objection," he said. "There's a clear pattern of implicit consent." Implicit. That word again. "It would be difficult," he continued, "to argue now that these decisions were unauthorized." He paused, letting the point settle. That was intentional. Pressure, applied early. My attorney didn't respond immediately. She let the silence sit. Then she opened the folder in front of her, neatly organized, tabbed, prepared. "We're not arguing management," she said calmly. "We're addressing movement." She slid a document across the table. Transaction summaries, layered, structured, annotated. Kowalski glanced down, didn't react. Victor did, barely. But enough. "We've also submitted a suspicious activity report," she added. That shifted the room, not visibly, but structurally, because that moved the conversation beyond us, beyond this table, into something larger. Kowalski's tone adjusted slightly. "On what grounds?" "Pattern transfers through intermediary entities," she said. "Authorization inconsistencies, potential misrepresentation of account ownership." Clean, direct, no exaggeration, no emotion, just facts. Victor leaned forward then. "What exactly are you saying?" he asked. My attorney didn't look at him. She kept her attention on Kowalski. "We're saying the pattern doesn't support standard management behavior." Kowalski tapped the edge of the document once. Thinking, reframing. "Patterns can be interpreted," he said. "Yes," she replied, "they can." Another pause. Then she added, almost lightly, "That's why we document them." I watched Victor as that landed. This was the moment, not the argument, the realization. Because he understood something now he hadn't before. This wasn't about whether he could explain the transfers. It was about whether he could explain all of them, consistently, over time, under review. Those are different problems, and one of them doesn't hold. The conversation shifted after that, less confident, more cautious. Kowalski recalibrated, focused on containment again. "Perhaps we should consider resolving this privately," he said. "A settlement would limit unnecessary exposure." There it was, again. Contained. I leaned forward slightly for the first time. "Contained for who?" I asked. The question sat in the room. No one answered it directly. They didn't need to, because we all understood the implication. My attorney closed the folder. "We're open to discussion," she said. but not at the expense of clarity. Clear. That was the word. Not fast, not quiet. Clear. The meeting ended shortly after. No agreement, no resolution, just movement. As we stepped out into the hallway, my attorney turned to me. "They weren't expecting the report," she said. "No. They'll adjust." "I know." She studied me for a moment. "You're very calm." I considered that, not as a compliment, as an observation. "They're still building," I said. "And you're still letting them," she replied. "Yes." A small pause. Then she nodded. "All right." No judgment, just acknowledgement. Because she understood the structure now. This wasn't about stopping something, it was about finishing it. I stepped outside into the afternoon light. The city moved the same way it always had. Cars passing, people walking, conversations blending into background noise. Normal. Everything looked normal. But underneath it, the system had crossed another line. And once that happens, it doesn't go back. The first sign they were losing control wasn't what they said. It was how quickly they started saying it. Victor called late that night, not from his usual number. I let it ring once before answering. "You need to stop this," he said immediately. "No greeting, no build-up, just urgency." "That's not how this works," I replied. "You're escalating something that doesn't need to be escalated." His voice was tight now, not angry, pressed. "It already escalated," I said. "You just didn't notice when." A pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, measured, but uneven. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. "No," I answered. "I'm making it visible." Silence. Then softer. "We can fix this." That word again, fix, as if this had broken by accident. "As what?" I asked. "A misunderstanding?" Another pause. He didn't answer that either. "Just pull back," he said. "Let's resolve it privately." There it was again. Containment. "It's already outside of that," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means it's not just ours anymore." The silence this time was different. Longer. He understood. Not everything, but enough. "You talked to someone," he said. "Yes." "Who?" "That doesn't matter." "It does to me." "I know." He exhaled sharply. "This isn't going to go the way you think it will," he said. That wasn't a threat. It was uncertainty, trying to sound like confidence. "I'm not guessing," I replied, and I ended the call. The next morning, Mara tried something else. She didn't come to the house this time. She sent a message. Simple. "We need to talk. Alone." I read it once, then set the phone down. An hour later, another message. "Please, not urgency, not pressure, positioning." I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to the data. Another transfer had cleared overnight. Faster than before, less cautious. The structure was tightening. I pulled the authorization logs, Victor again, but this time the overlap was clearer. Not just intersection, dependency. One approval feeding into another. Layered access. I traced it backward, through the entity, through the processor, through the shell, and then I saw it. A gap. Not in the money. In the logic. A decision point that didn't align. Victor's access path didn't fully support the transaction, which meant he wasn't building this alone. I leaned back slowly. "You don't even see it," I said quietly. Because if he had, he wouldn't have signed it. That was the difference. Mara understood structure. Victor understood movement. Neither of them understood the full system, and systems built on partial understanding fail under pressure. I opened a new file, mapped the relationships, not emotional, operational. Who initiated, who routed, who benefited. The lines didn't run clean, they crossed, overlapped, contradicted. Perfect, because contradiction creates exposure. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't them, it was my attorney. "Call me when you can." I did. "Someone reached out," she said. "From where?" "Federal level, indirect inquiry, not action." That was expected. Not immediate, not aggressive, just awareness. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That we're documenting," she said, "and that we'll cooperate if needed." "Good." A pause. "They're interested in the pattern," she added. Of course they were. Patterns don't stay private. "They should be," I said. Another pause. Then, more carefully, "This is going to shift things," she said. "I know." "Are you ready for that?" I looked at the screen in front of me, the data, the structure, the mistakes starting to surface. Yes. And I meant it. Because readiness isn't about comfort, it's about alignment. After the call, I sat there for a moment, letting everything settle. Then I opened the last layer, the combined view, all transactions, all paths, all authorizations, and I watched it, not as separate events, as a system. It moved faster now, less controlled, more exposed. Victor was reacting. Mara was adjusting, but they weren't coordinating anymore. Not fully. That was the break, the point where control fragments. And once it fragments, it doesn't come back together. My phone lit up again. Victor. I didn't answer. Then Mara. I didn't answer that either. Across the room, the house was quiet, unchanged, but everything underneath it had shifted. They were still moving, still building, still pushing forward. They thought they were close, and they were, just not in the way they believed. I closed the laptop slowly, then said it out loud, just once. "You built something you couldn't control." The house was quiet the morning after everything settled. Not empty, not hollow, just quiet in a way that felt finished. I woke before the alarm, the light already moving through the curtains in thin, steady lines. For a moment, I stayed still, listening. No tension in the air, no anticipation, just space. That was new. Mason was still asleep. Lily had left her shoes by the door again, one slightly turned, like she'd kicked them off mid-step. Normal things. I made coffee and stood by the window while it brewed. Outside, the street looked exactly the same. Neighbors walking dogs, cars passing, a delivery truck stopping 2 houses down. Nothing about the world had changed. That was the strange part, because everything had. The settlement had finalized 2 weeks earlier. Clean terms, clear structure. The house stayed with me. Primary custody, stable schedule. Financial restitution had already begun processing through the agreed channels. No drama, no last-minute resistance. Victor signed. Mara disappeared from the process entirely. Not legally involved, not officially, but not untouched either. The accounts had been closed. The entities dissolved. What they had built didn't hold. I didn't follow what happened to them after, not closely. I heard things, indirectly, that they moved in together for a while, that it didn't last, that pressure changes people. But those weren't my outcomes to track. I had my own. A month after the settlement, I moved, not far, just enough. A smaller house near the water, quieter, with a porch that caught the light in the evenings. The kind of place that didn't try to hold more than it needed to. The first night there, after the kids had gone to sleep, I sat outside and listened to the wind coming off the water. No traffic, no echoes of conversations in other rooms, just space again. It took a while to get used to that. Rebuilding doesn't feel like progress at first. It feels like absence, like something that used to fill the room is gone, and you're left deciding what belongs there now. I didn't rush it. I focused on what was in front of me. Work came first. 3 months later, I stepped into a new role, not because of what happened, but because I didn't step back when it did. My manager called it consistency. I understood it differently. Pressure reveals structure, and structure either holds or it doesn't. Mine held. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. Mason asked fewer questions than I thought he would. Lily asked more. "Are we still a family?" she said one night, standing in the doorway, holding the edge of the frame like she wasn't sure if she should come in. I set the book down and looked at her. "Yes," I said. She studied my face. "All of us?" That question stayed in the air a little longer. "Not in the same way," I said. but were still yours." She nodded slowly, like she was filing it somewhere she'd come back to later. Then she walked in and climbed onto the bed beside me. No more questions. That was enough. I started therapy in August, Wednesday afternoons. Not because I couldn't function, because I understood that functioning and processing are not the same thing. There are things you don't carry forward. You place them somewhere, you understand them, and then you let them stay there. That matters. I didn't date. Not out of fear, out of clarity. I wasn't looking to replace anything. I was building something that didn't need replacing. Time passed. Quietly. Without forcing itself into anything dramatic. And then, one evening, almost a year later, I sat on the porch again. The water was still, the air clear. The kids were inside, arguing about something small and temporary. I held a cup of coffee in my hands and looked out at the horizon. And for the first time, I thought about it all without tension. Not the betrayal, not the structure, not the outcome, just the distance between who I was that night in the rain and who I was now. That was the part that mattered. Not what I kept, not what I proved, but what I didn't lose. I thought back to the call I made that night, standing outside, rain hitting the pavement, everything still unresolved. They assumed I was calling a lawyer. That would have made sense. It would have fit the situation. But that's not who I called first. I called someone who understood patterns, someone who knew what happens when systems cross certain lines. Because once they do, they don't belong to you anymore. They belong to something larger. I didn't build the system they created. I didn't control every part of what happened after, but I saw it early enough, clearly enough, and I made sure it was recorded. That was the difference. Inside the house, Mason laughed at something. Lily told him to be quiet. Normal again. I took a slow sip of coffee, the warmth settling in. Then I said it, not to anyone in particular, just to mark it. They thought they were using my name. The wind moved lightly across the water. I watched it for a moment longer, then finished the thought. They didn't realize I was building the record. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Some stories aren't about revenge. They're about clarity, about the moment you stop reacting and start seeing things exactly as they are. If you've ever been underestimated or felt like something didn't add up but couldn't prove it, you're not alone. Sometimes the truth doesn't explode. It builds quietly until it can't be ignored. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.